Hokage, in the name of time, shock the ninja world. Chapter 61, Hoshino Kaede's escort team. Kosuke Maraboshi is a hidden boss in future Konoha. He has the aura of genin on his head, but all he does is jonin's business. He is one of the strongest genin in Konoha. Due to a command error, which resulted in the death of his teammates, he was filled with guilt and vowed to be a genin in front of second Hokage for the rest of his life. Having said this, I actually persisted. He has experienced the second generation project, the third generation project, the fourth generation project and the fifth generation project. If he were placed in his previous life, he would be a veteran of the 5 dynasties. Looking at the young face and admiring expression in front of him, Hoshino Kaede smiled and said, "Kosuke, right? Let's talk after we come in." After the two entered the door, Hoshino Kaede said hello to his mother, and then took him to the yard. "Why did Tobirama ask you to come here?" Hoshino Kaede made a pot of tea and handed him a cup. Maruhoshi Kosuke took it with both hands. "Kaido, Hokage-sama didn't say anything, he just asked me to follow you from now on." "Really?" Hoshino Kaede looked at Kosuke Maruhoshi meaningfully, making him sweat dripping from his forehead, as if he was being stared at by a beast, and he was feeling extremely stressed. Is this the momentum of Hoshino-sama? He is not inferior to Hokage-sama at all. Forget it, since he asked you to follow me, then just follow. Hoshino Kaede's gaze suddenly changed, and he said with a chuckle. "From now on, you will be a member of my escort team." Hearing this, Kosuke Maruhoshi responded loudly, "Yes." But then, with a confused look on his face, he asked, Isn't the escort only for the Hokage? How could Mr. Hoshino?" As he spoke, Kosuke Maruhoshi hurriedly waved his hands and explained, "I'm not questioning Mr. Hoshino, I'm just a little surprised." "Well, that's it." Haha. Hoshino Kaede couldn't help it anymore. Fausuke was quite interesting when he was a child. "Don't worry, the teacher asked me to form a guard team a long time ago. It's not Hokage's patent, at least for me, Tobirama won't care anyway." Then, Hoshino Kaede showed a solemn face and said, "But not everyone can come in my escort team. If you can't reach the level I expected." Hoshino Kaede's tone suddenly lengthened, his smile was mysterious, and he continued. "Then, even if you are the person introduced by Tobirama, I will not recognize you, do you understand?" Kosuke Maruhoshi was shocked by this aura and was stunned for a short while, but then nodded heavily. "I understand, Mr. Hoshino, I won't hold you back. Don't talk too much, or you'll be exposed easily," Hoshino Kaede said with a hint. Maraboshi Kosuke pursed his lips, a painful memory seemed to be surging deep in his heart, about to break through the restraints, and a sad look was about to fill his entire heart. Just when he was about to be overwhelmed by memories, Hoshino Kaede patted him on the shoulder and said encouragingly, "Fausuke, you should feel guilty, but you are stuck in the memories and struggling, and this is a dead end. I think they should be watching you in the sky. Have confidence in yourself, turn your guilt into motivation, and work hard to live a good life." Hoshino Kaede's words were like spring breeze and drizzle, which warmed his heart, melted the ice and snow in his heart, and brought vitality. Maraboshi Kosuke's eyes were filled with tears, and he began to shed tears unsatisfactorily, whimpering from his mouth. Seeing this, Hoshino Kaede couldn't help but sigh, stretched out her finger, and touched his forehead. Kosuke Maruhoshi fell backwards, tears slowly overflowing from the corners of his eyes. "Go to sleep, Kosuke, I hope you have a good dream." Hoshino Kaede looked at him in a low voice and murmured. Then he looked up at the clear sky, holding the teacup, and gradually became fascinated. After half a day, Maruhoshi Kosuke woke up leisurely and opened his eyes in confusion. He was still awake for a while. "Are you awake?" Kaede Hoshino's voice suddenly sounded, and Kosuke Maruhoshi recalled what happened before. "It seems that you have made peace with yourself." Hoshino Kaede looked at him up and down, looking much better. The cheerful look before was obviously a disguise, and he was unwilling to show his inner side to others. "I'm much better now, and it's obvious that I feel like a different person." After a moment of silence, Kosuke Maruhoshi saluted Hoshino Kaede again. He had a dream in which his former teammates encouraged him and comforted him over and over again. He knew that Hoshino Kaede did all of this. "Hey, it's easy, don't worry." Hoshino Kaede waved his hand indifferently. "It's all my own fault that I can let go. I'm just going along with the flow. Hoshino-sama, Kosuke will follow you to the death from now on," Kosuke Maruhoshi said with sincerity and determination. Hoshino Kaede's face turned a little darker, the corner of his mouth twitched, and he said helplessly, "Oh, you, TSK, forget it, do whatever you like. That guy Tobirama just likes to dump this shit on me." Hoshino Kaede cursed, as if he had a huge grievance on him. After scolding for a while, I felt much better, and then I asked him, what are you going to do next? Is there anywhere you want to go? Kosuke Maraboshi shook his head and said, I haven't thought about it yet, but I can't let ninjutsu practice fall behind. Well, that's true. Hoshino Kaede nodded in agreement, and then began to send ninjutsu, as usual. Speaking of which, he seems to be a boy who gives away money to anyone he likes. However, they are all good seedlings, the pillars of Konoha's future, so it doesn't hurt to give them away, it won't be a loss. This is for you. The water-style experience Tobarama gave me before should be very useful to you. Hoshino Kaede tossed it casually. Maruhoshi Kosuke hurriedly took it, his mouth opened slightly, and his eyes were full of surprise. This is the water-style experience of Second Hokage, known as High Dun. I will work hard and never let you down. Maruhoshi Kosuke clenched his fists, with flames rising in his eyes. Well, do you have a place to live? Hoshino Kaede suddenly asked. Maraboshi Kosuke replied, yes, it is the house left behind by my parents after they died of illness. That's it. Hoshino Kaede chuckled, I'm going to move out later, do you want to come with us? Together? Maruhoshi Kosuke was shocked. The invitation was too sudden and he was a little overwhelmed. Do you want to come? Hoshino Kaede asked again. Maruhoshi Kosuke hesitated for a moment and nodded slightly, yeah. The answer was very soft, but Hoshino Kaede heard it. That's it, I will inform you later. Hoshino Kaede glanced at the door, stood up and walked out. Outside the door is still the familiar Umbu. Hoshino-sama. Hoshino Kaede's greeting reached his ears just after the gate of opening. Ever since Kaede Hoshino showed off Kamui, his strength has become known to everyone. In his first attack, he crushed Second Raikage with his absolute strength, making him famous. The disadvantage of being famous is that wherever you go, there are people greeting you. But to be honest, Hoshino Kaede is not too repelled by this feeling, it feels pretty good. No wonder some people desperately want to be famous. Master Hokage is holding a high-level meeting and I need you to come over. Umbu lowered his head respectfully and knelt down on one knee, the enthusiasm in his eyes almost overflowing. Hoshino Kaede twitched the corner of his mouth, shuddered, and said with a numb scalp, I know. Chapter 62, Post-War Matters and Warnings. After sending Umbu away, Hoshino Kaede was still frightened and the corners of his mouth were twitching. It's so scary. That look in his eyes makes people feel chilled. Is this what a fanatical fan is like? I've learned a lot. Good, yeah, I'm going out. After calming down, Hoshino Kaede turned to the door and shouted. After receiving the response, Hoshino Kaede used his strength to jump to the roof and climbed back and forth. Convening a high-level meeting at this time seems to be about peace talks. Hoshino Kaede was thinking as he ran. Kirigakure and Iwagakure retreated, but they couldn't let them go like this. Judging from Tobarama's strength, they would probably bleed heavily. You can't say, you might blackmail them until they can't recover. Thinking about it, Hoshino Kaede couldn't help but laugh out loud. Tobarama was not dead, and everything was different. A few minutes later, Hoshino Kaede came into the building and heard the sound of Tobarama flipping through documents. It is estimated that they are at least 1 meter high, and they are as numerous as snowflakes. TSK, what a hard life. Hoshino Kaede said happily after sitting down. Tobarama replied without raising his head, haha, don't worry, you will do the same in the future. Hoshino Kaede stumbled, almost losing his seat and falling to the ground, and said angrily, ahem, it's still early. It's getting late, I can still hold on for a few more years, and you will have to do it if you don't. Tobarama raised his head and said with a serious look on his face. Hoshino Kaede's eyes widened and he pointed at him, aren't you going to let your disciple take over? Disciple? Alas, I had this idea before, but now. Tobarama shook his head as he spoke and did not continue. What happened? Did his butterfly destroy Hiruzen's third Hokage? No, that's not the case. Although he didn't do human affairs in the later period, he was still smart and capable when he first took over. Is Tobarama really going to cut him off? Hoshino Kaede looked directly at Tobarama with big doubtful eyes, expecting him to help him solve his doubts. Why do you want to see me? Don't you want me? Tobarama said with narrowed eyes. Hoshino Kaede nodded silently, I think Hiruzen and Danzo are very good, why do you insist on catching me? Haha. Tobarama sneered. The two of them are excellent, but compared to you, they are far behind. Hoshino Kaede became interested and asked, am I so outstanding in front of you? I didn't see that you would still be able to praise others. The veins on Tobarama's forehead popped out, and his fist as big as a sandbag was ready, just about to hit him on the head. Seeing that the situation was not right, Hoshino Kaede immediately became serious and shook his head firmly. Forget it, don't focus on me. Hokage is just a name, it's of no use to me. Tobirama shook his head. I know what you are thinking, but sometimes names are very important, for example. After saying that, he searched for a moment from a stack of documents, took out one and handed it to Hoshino Kaede. Let's take a look at the latest information from Umbo. Hoshino Kaede took the hand and glanced casually from the corner of his eye. As soon as the information passed through his mind, he frowned. This is real? How can it be false? Hey, be good. Hoshino Kaede read all the information intently. The second Raikage of Kumogakure village was killed by a sneak attack by gold and silver horns. Afterwards, the two were besieged by Kumogakure ninjas and died of exhaustion. In just one sentence, a huge amount of information was revealed. Hoshino Kaede's eyes widened, as if he wanted to see through them. Second Raikage is still dead, also killed by Jin Jiaoyin Jiao. What are you going to do? Hoshino Kaede looked up at Tobirama. What else can be done? Recuperation are the most important thing now. We can't fight anymore. Tobirama has a quick mind and will not make such stupid mistakes. Second Raikage's death is unknown. Hoshino Kaede shook his head and sighed. But it's also a good thing for Konoha. Just as he was sighing, there was a sound of footsteps outside the door. After a while, Tobirama's 6 disciples all arrived, and Naruto, as Konoha's military advisor, naturally had to be there too. Nowadays, there are only 3 people who can be considered as high-level people in Konoha. Second Hokage, Uzumaki Mido, and finally Hoshino Kaede, the rest are just incidental. Even Tobirama's disciples are the same. On the one hand, their strength is not enough to intimidate everyone, on the other hand, their status is insufficient. The disciples are just disciples, and have not yet stepped into the center of power of Konoha. Teacher. After Sarutobi Hiruzen entered the door, he took the lead in saying hello to Tobirama, followed by the others. Hoshino Kaede glanced at Tobirama vaguely, and saw that he had no objection and acquiesced, so he knew that he still liked Sarutobi Hiruzen in his heart. After everyone arrived, Tobirama nodded slightly and looked at Nara Shikachi. Shikachi, have you delivered the peace treaty between Kurogakure and Iwagakure? As a defeated country, compensation is necessary, let alone someone else's active aggression. Nara nodded, took out 2 treaties, handed them to Tobirama, and said, they sent people here shortly after the defeat. I'm afraid that Konoha will attack, and I want to implement the peace talks as soon as possible. Tobirama saw through their plan at a glance and said with a sneer. Well, it's true. Kurogakure and Iwagakure have suffered too much losses and are no longer able to fight Konoha anymore. Nara smiled knowingly. Such moments of profit were rare. If he didn't kill them severely, he would be sorry for the ninjas fighting on the front line. Louis, you can ask for as much compensation as you want. It's best to make them feel pain or fear. Tobirama said with a stern expression. After giving instructions to Louis, Tobirama turned his attention to his disciples. The cold gaze swept over him, and a chill suddenly emerged from his heart. He couldn't help but swallowed his saliva and said to himself, teacher's murderous intention is frightening. After a while, Tobirama withdrew his gaze and said slowly, Konoha is going through a war. This is a critical moment. Everyone must do their duty. I don't want anyone to slack off. The sharp gaze appeared again, falling on each of their hearts. Yes, teacher. Times 6, everyone responded loudly, some with evil intentions in their backs, sweat dripping from their backs. Tobirama waved his hand and asked them to go about their business. For a moment, only Tobirama and Hoshino Kaede were left in the room. There was such a big fire just now, what happened? Hoshino Fong took a sip of tea and said quietly. Tobirama sighed deeply and said, the disciples have grown up and are no longer easy to manage. Haha, you also said that when you have grown up, let go of what you should. Hoshino Kaede shook his head. Hearing this, Tobirama was silent for a moment and finally nodded. As long as it doesn't shake the foundation of Konoha, I can tolerate it. Hoshino Kaede was non-committal and said, I established a guard team. I'm afraid you won't agree, so I'll let you know. Tobirama snorted coldly, is it useful if I don't agree? You still turn a deaf ear. Ahem, you can't say that. At least you have to respect it on the face of it. Hoshino Kaede said with a smile. Chapter 63, Midarashi's Ishiao, haha, you know it's on the surface. If he hadn't been able to escape faster than anyone else, Tobirama would have let him know why the flowers were so red. Hoshino Kaede spread his hands, showing a helpless look, and winked at Tobirama, and said, "There's nothing I can do, I'm very vindictive. I will remember what someone did back then." In the last sentence, Hoshino Kaede's tone was particularly strong, as if he wanted to eat Tobirama alive. Mentioning what happened back then, Tobirama touched his nose with a guilty conscience. After all, it was him who did something wrong in the first place. My thinking is still stuck in the Warring States period, and it is indeed a bit too much to let a seedling growing in the garden kill. Ahem, Xiaofeng, isn't that thing over? Tobirama explained with a paralyzed face. Hoshino Kaede snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "In the past? My young heart was ruined by you. Do you think an apology can solve it?" Tobirama's eyelids twitched, he rubbed his eyebrows, and said, "Tell me, what do you want? Stop beating around the bush." "Really?" Hoshino Kaede raised his eyebrows and said doubtfully. "Well, anyway, even if I don't agree, you will still do it. It's better to say it's okay," Tobirama said with a headache. Looking at the whole of Konoha, whoever sees him disrespects him and says hello. It just so happens that the eldest brother has accepted a disciple, and his talent is surprisingly high, and his strength is getting better every day. This put him in a very difficult position, unable to be beaten or scolded, just like a little ancestor. Hehe, it's good to know. Hoshino Kaede felt happy when he saw this, and continued. "It's no big deal. That is to say, when I ask for someone in the future, you cannot refuse, and the escort team is not under your control." Tobirama asked curiously, "That's all? Nothing else?" Hearing this, Hoshino Kaede pretended to continue making requests. "Since you asked so compassionately, then I—" Stop, that's it, it's gone, you leave quickly." Tobirama interrupted him quickly, and then started to chase people away. Hoshino Kaede pouted, "Can't stand it anymore? I really have no patience at all. Okay, I wish you a busy day and night." Hoshino Kaede left a heartfelt blessing and then left gracefully. Tobirama. After leaving the building, Hoshino Kaede did not go home, but went to find the house where he lived. Thinking back to his savings, he couldn't help but grin. Buying your first house in your life naturally means you should be happy, and it also means you are about to break away from the clutches of your parents. He was humming a song and his walking posture looked extremely arrogant. "We, the common people, are so happy today." Hoshino Kaede chose his house with the steps of disowning his relatives. The houses in Konoha are all zero cost and cost nothing at all. And for Hoshino Kaede's meritorious service, Konoha gave it to him for free, as did many jonin. Private. Soon, Hoshino Kaede found a house that was very close to the ninja school, just a few steps away. The lighting is very high, there are 3 floors, and the windows are facing the school. He was very satisfied with this, and it was also a pleasure to look at the new seedlings of Konoha. Hoshino Kaede waved to a certain place. Swish, a figure suddenly appeared. "I'll choose this. Let's talk to Tobirama." Hoshino Kaede pointed at the house in front of him and said. "Yes." Umbu didn't hesitate at all. After accepting the order, he disappeared again. After choosing, Hoshino Kaede suddenly felt something was wrong and looked around. The location is perfect, and the location is also very good. Hey, that guy Tobirama couldn't have specially reserved it. The corner of Hoshino Kaede's mouth twitched crazily. After thinking about it, it was really something he could do. Just as he was scolding the old fox Tobirama in his mind, a childish voice came from behind. "Eh? Are you Hoshino-sama?" The sudden sound interrupted Hoshino Kaede's thoughts, and when he turned around, he saw the little guy looking at him curiously. The black broken hair looks very refreshing, and the young face has a hint of curiosity. A ray of sunshine hits it, making people feel good. Although naughty children are annoying, well-behaved children are also lovable. "Huh? Do you know me?" Hoshino Kaede has always been very patient when facing cute cubs. She bent down and touched his head. "Yeah, the teacher admired you very much during class, and even said that you are still employed in the school." Speaking of this, Hoshino Kaede couldn't help but blush, but it quickly disappeared. He coughed a few times and said, "Really? What's your name?" For some reason, seeing this little guy, an inexplicable emotion arose in my heart. "My name is Mitarashi Zishiao. I have met you, sir." When the little guy heard this, he immediately became serious, his face was stern, and then he bent 90 degrees and gave a big salute to Hoshino Kaede. "Oh, Mitarashi Zishiao, what a name." Hoshino Kaede touched his chin while thinking in his mind. "Mitarashi, isn't this Anko's last name? Moreover, this name seems to have been seen in a certain novel." I remembered, it was Konoha's then minister, Umbo. Oh ho, so to speak, he met an incredible person. But now it seems that the famous minister Umbo is just a very cute kid. His eyes revealed clear stupidity and curiosity about the big shot. Xiao Zixiao, how old are you? Thinking of this, Hoshino Feng became even more pleased with him. He has reserved this person, no one can compete with him, not even when Uranus Lousy comes. Mitarashi Zixiao said obediently, 8 years old, 3rd grade. Do you want to follow your brother after graduation? The benefits are very generous. Hoshino Kaede couldn't wait any longer and planned to take action directly and kidnap the person over first. But, it's a bit wishful thinking. This. Mitarashi Zixiao was a little embarrassed when he heard this, hesitating and unable to speak complete words. Hoshino Kaede slapped his forehead, secretly feeling a little anxious, and then said with a smile, no need to reply so quickly, just tell me your decision before graduation. Hearing this, Mitarashi Zixiao nodded repeatedly, and then left in a hurry on the grounds that it was too late. Tisk, hey, little guy, you won't be able to escape so easily after being spotted by me. Hoshino Kaede looked at Mitarashi Zixiao, who was running away, and said with a chuckle. It just so happens that I have never been to a school where I have a temporary job. It would be good to pay attention to the new talents in the future. When Hoshino Kaede thought of this, his smile became even brighter, and he actually looked like a villain. It seems that Tsukumo is also in the 1st grade. Let's see how his life is at school. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Shaking his head, he turned his attention to the new house and prepared to change his style. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, in the ninja school, there are still students immersed in training, sweating youth. Hoshino Kaede saw Hatake Tsukumo's hard work through the window at a glance, with a happy smile on his face. Behind him, Matt Dai followed closely, not slacking off for a second. Chapter 64, Taking Up the Ninja School, Boom. On the large playground, a large group of little carrots were sparring in pairs. Mitarashi Zixiao knocked down his opponent with 1 punch, which seemed a little easy. Then I heard a large group of girls screaming and calling them frantically. Well, Zixiao is so awesome. Zixiao is number 1 again. She is beautiful and powerful. I have found my true love. Don't look at him, he's mine. Don't snatch it from me. Mitarashi Zixiao walked to the sidelines to rest with an accustomed expression. Hoshino Kaede nodded aside, yes, both taijutsu and ninjutsu are very comprehensive, and I deserve the 1st place. Hearing this, Mitarashi Zixiao complained, do you still doubt my strength? Hoshino Kaede stretched out his fingers and waved them left and right, no, I just want to see how strong other people are, and take a look at yours by the way. After saying that, without waiting for Zixiao to speak, he turned around and said to these brats. Okay, the battle is over. I only have one evaluation in my mind for this battle. Hoshino Kaede's eyes suddenly became sharp, and a slightly sharp aura erupted from his body. Mitarashi Zixiao's pupils shrank suddenly, and she was shocked inside. Is this the strength of Lord Hoshino? After returning that day, he, who was originally not interested in big shots, suddenly asked his father about it. This question shocked his young heart. A disciple of the First Hokage, he crushed Raikage on the Kumogakure battlefield and single-handedly changed the situation of the battle. He is a man who stands at the pinnacle of ninja. When this series of words is placed on the same person, his body suddenly shines with a dazzling light, which is extremely dazzling. I thought that one generation in Konoha would be better than the other, but I didn't expect that it would be so bad. I think you haven't learned anything at all. You are all just like garbage. The crazy output made the students' faces turn red. No one wanted to be called trash. This was a matter of dignity. But facing the people in front of them, they couldn't say a word. Most of the class were civilians. Hoshino Kaede's deeds had already spread throughout Konoha, and everyone knew about it. Long before Kaede Hoshino came to teach this class, their parents had given them numerous warnings not to be naughty. Otherwise, what awaits them after they return is their parents' mixed doubles, giving them a complete childhood. Teacher Hoshino, your words are too biased. Mitarashi Zixiao watched his classmates shrink their necks one by one, not daring to look at them, and then stood up and retorted. Regarding Zixiao's words, Hoshino Feng did not reprimand him, but looked at the others and said angrily. Look at you, you don't even dare to say a word, you are nothing more than a preparatory ninja. I think you might as well go back to farming and be happy. This is not Wenwen Township. Emotions are like boiling water, spreading around. The little devils were young and energetic, and when they were so aroused, they all retorted loudly. Teacher, you are wrong, we are not trash. Yes, I don't accept anyone who is born strong. What you learn in school is just the basics. It's far different from before. I don't agree with what you said. Hoshino Kaede looked at the excited crowd and nodded secretly. This is right. He doesn't want a lifeless classroom. What's your name? Hoshino Feng raised the corner of his mouth and pointed at a kid next to Zishao and asked. My name is Yu Guanya. Yu Guanya straightened her back and said loudly. After hearing this, Hoshino Kaede felt even more appreciative in his eyes. Very good, this is the kind of temperament a boy should have. Hoshino Kaede praised. Yu Guanya suddenly looked happy, but then collapsed again, and only heard Hoshino Kaede add another sentence. Seeing that you are so energetic, then just run in circles around the playground. I don't say whether you should stop or not. The Moonlight Knight instantly turned to stone, and it wasn't until Zishao pulled at the corner of her clothes that she finally regained consciousness. What? I just gave you a compliment and it's not enough? TSK, since you're scared, forget it. Hoshino Kaede said, pretending to be generous. Yu Guanya felt countless eyes staring at him from behind, his face suddenly turned red, his neck felt stiff, and blood rushed to his head. As soon as he turned around, he started running circles around the playground at full speed. Don't look at him. Since you all said that the school teaches basics, let's make it a little more difficult for you. Hoshino Kaede clapped his hands to draw his attention back to himself, and then said sadly. Mitarashi Zishao couldn't help but swallowed. A moment later, more than 40 students were all squatting hard under the scorching sun. Not only that, appropriate weights are worn on the wrists and ankles to ensure that the body will not be damaged. Oh, TSK, in this weather, eating watermelon is a beautiful thing. Not far away, Hoshino Kaede was holding a piece of watermelon in each hand, eating it with enjoyment in front of the students. Gudong, I don't know if it was that kid, but the sound of swallowing saliva made Hoshino Kaede smile even more. During the whole class, I did nothing. The muscles in my squatting legs were stiff, and the slightest movement caused unbearable pain. Hoshino Kaede looked at Mitarashi Zishao, who was the only one on the field. Only one person in the class was still holding on. The rest of the people all collapsed to the ground, feeling like they were surviving a disaster. Zishao, you're the only one left, why don't you take a break? Hoshino Kaede said seductively while chewing on the watermelon. How insidious. Everyone suddenly said something in their hearts. But due to the teacher's terrifying prestige, I could only think about it silently in my heart. No. I can still hold on. With sweat rolling down her cheeks, Mitarashi Zishao gritted her teeth and managed to say something. Not bad. Hoshino Kaede grinned, turned to Yu Guanya and shouted, okay, little guy, stop, I see you staggering around, but don't make any mistakes. Yu Guanya staggered 2 steps. After listening to Hoshino Kaede's words, he fell down from exhaustion and stared at the sky. I can't say a word, and I don't want to say anything. My physical fitness is not good. Hoshino Kaede murmured. You still have to practice. When everyone on the side heard this, a few black lines slid down their foreheads, and they secretly complained, wondering if they could still see the sun tomorrow. Plop. Zishao finally couldn't hold on any longer, his body swayed, his eyes went black, and he passed out. The moment before he fell, Hoshino Kaede immediately caught him, shook his head, and said, stubborn temper is just like Sakumo. After saying that, the mysterious power of time was activated, turning his time back 1 hour. With her physical strength instantly exhausted, Zishao opened her eyes and was confused for a while. Didn't I faint? How could? Before he could finish speaking, Hoshino Kaede slapped him on the head. Stop doubting, I did it and you can't get up. Hoshino Kaede let go of his hand, hugged Yu Guanya back, and woke him up in the same way. You are lucky to have met me, but also unlucky because I am your teacher. Hoshino Kaede gestured for the two of them to return to the team, and then said with a smile. Just when everyone was confused, Hoshino Kaede explained to them. I have the blood inheritance limit of time and space, and I can freely adjust time forward or rewind. I was the one who rewinded the time of those 2 boys just now. Let their physical strength return to the level it was an hour ago, so, you are blessed. Hoshino Kaede raised his eyebrows and looked at them with a smirk. Chapter 65. Being a ninja is not something you can do if you want to. After hearing this, Mitarashi Zishao and Yu Guangai swallowed their saliva. They looked at each other and saw the bitterness in their eyes. This teacher doesn't play according to the routine, who can control him? Your class is an ordinary class, and I feel bad about it, so I will train you in the days to come and try to beat up all the people in the elite class. Hoshino Kaede didn't mind making things bigger at all, and he just wanted to beat people up. If you don't finish, I'm sorry, I will tell Tobarama that your graduation will be delayed or even expelled. Believe me, I have the ability. It was obviously a gentle smile, but it made these little devils feel a chill in their hearts, which was hard to believe. Gudong, Gudong, seeing everyone swallowing their saliva in fear, Hoshino Kaede was very satisfied. Whether it is delayed graduation or expulsion, they are not acceptable. Most of the students in this class are civilians, and few are talented. For them, ninja is a profession that can make money quickly, if the degree of danger is put aside. A sea-level mission can earn tens of thousands of yen, and if you divide it up, one person can earn several thousand yen. For those from ordinary families, this is already a very considerable income. Looking at all professions, the remuneration is almost top-notch. Moreover, in addition to considerable income, its status is also very high. An ordinary chunin can command genin, and ordinary villagers will say hello when they see it. It is not difficult to imagine how popular a profession with such high money and status is, even if one loses one's life in the middle of the mission. It seems that everyone is aware of the seriousness of the matter, so I won't repeat it again. Hoshino Kaede nodded with satisfaction. Some people said before that the teaching methods taught in school are very basic, so I will change the teaching method. I guarantee that the fun in teaching is, of course, my fun, not yours. Hoshino Kaede smiled at the corner of his mouth. As the atmosphere gradually became more solemn, the little ghost stopped laughing and made no sound at all, quietly listening to Hoshino Kaede's speech. Well, it's noon. Well, let's eat first. I want to see everyone gather in an hour. Hoshino Kaede raised his hand to block the scorching sun hanging high in the sky. After pondering for a moment, he let everyone rest and eat, and then left the playground, allowing them to move freely. Without the oppression of the big devil, the little devils could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Only after Hoshino Kaede walked away a little did they dare to discuss in a low voice. So scary, Mr. Hoshino is so scary. A boy with a Madara face said in fear. Will he really expel us? A girl said worriedly. After all, the tone didn't sound like he was telling lies. Moonlight Knight listened to these discussions, and after thinking for a moment, he looked at Mitarashi Zixiao beside him. Zixiao, what do you think of this teacher? Mitarashi Zixiao sat down, picked up the lunchbox, and said while eating, it's very strong. It's amazing. Nonsense, I know that. With the momentum just now, I'm afraid no teacher in the school can match it. Yu Guangye complained. Instead of talking nonsense now, it's better to get more rest. God knows what they will do to us in the afternoon. Mitarashi Zixiao said calmly, his mouth never stopped for a moment, and he did not waste a moment of rest. When Yu Guangye heard this, he immediately sat next to him, opened his lunchbox, and started eating. When the others saw the two strongest people in the class eating, they began to follow suit. After all, it was right to follow the strong ones. On the playground, a large group of children eating on the spot immediately attracted the attention of other classes. On the teaching floor, students in 2s and 3s pointed at them. Hatake Sakumo, a first-year student, was a self-taught student. He turned his head and looked at Hoshino Kaede beside him with his dead fish eyes. Brother, you don't really want them to fight with the elite class, do you? Hoshino Kaede rubbed his hair, squinted, and said, of course, words spoken are like water thrown out, there is no reason to take them back. But the strength of the elite class is too far behind them, and I can't see a glimmer of hope. Hoshino Kaede thought for a moment, chuckled and said, Sakumo, this world is often judged by success or failure, but you have to understand that the prerequisite for success or failure is survival. I don't expect them to be very good or what heights they can reach in the future. I just hope they can live well. But, ninjas always have various accidents, and losing their lives is common. Hatake Sakumo didn't understand. So, I let them feel it in advance. Hoshino Kaede said. The profession of ninja is not something you can just talk about. After saying that, Hoshino Kaede walked towards the resting people, leaving Hatake Sakumo with a thoughtful look on his face. Seeing the teacher walking over, everyone immediately stood up obediently without any unnecessary movement. Yes, the training in the afternoon will be easier. I have information about each of you, but I think it is faster to learn more about it in person, so. At the end of Hoshino Kaede's words, his eyes glanced back and forth, as if choosing his opponent, and finally landed on Yu Guangye. Come on, little guy, let me see how bloody you are. Hoshino Kaede smiled wickedly. Don't cry, I don't know how to comfort children. Yu Guangye snorted softly, teacher, let me show you how powerful I am. Hoshino Kaede raised his eyebrows. Is this confidence or arrogance? Come on. Hoshino Kaede hooked him with one hand behind his back, quite provocatively. The venue was empty, and the students cheered for Yu Guangye. Only Zixia felt that Yu Guangye would definitely lose. Yu Guangye pressed down, then stepped forward and swept out with a kick that was very powerful and had the sound of breaking wind. Hoshino Kaede was as steady as a mountain, blocking with one hand, feeling the strength, and secretly commented, "Not bad, but not enough." There was no counterattack. Hoshino Kaede accurately grabbed his ankle, swung him hard, and threw him several meters away. The Moonlight Knight rolled several times in the air, staggered a few steps and then stood firm. "That's it? Then you'd better go back," Hoshino Kaede said mockingly. Although he knew it was a way to provoke the general, Yu Guangye always felt uncomfortable in his heart. An unknown fire burned in his heart, damn it. The test just now made him understand immediately that there was no advantage in physical skills. In this case, he had to find another way. Yu Guangye formed a seal with his hands, and his speed was quite satisfactory. Hoshino Kaede did not interrupt him, and looked at what he wanted to do. After the seal was completed, 2 streaks of white smoke rose into the sky, and the clones rushed forward as fast as lightning, launching a pincer attack on Hoshino Kaede from the left and right sides. The real Yu Guangye came behind Hoshino Kaede like a ghost, his aura suddenly became looming, and he held the small ninja sword tightly in his hand. Cooperate with the clone to perform Konoha-style swordsmanship. This is currently his most powerful blow, even Mitarashi Zixia has to avoid its edge. But they saw the 3 of them working together in a tacit understanding, their swords flashing, aiming at various vital parts respectively, and their attacks were fierce and dazzling. The next moment, I saw the corners of Hoshino Kaede's mouth raised, and in an instant, he moved. Chapter 66, Delicate Flowers in the Village. The sharp sword light was about to fall on Hoshino Phone. Yu Guangye looked happy at this moment, as if he had seen the moment when he succeeded. "It's a good idea, but unfortunately, I can only think about it." The perspective in front of him suddenly spun, his head sank, and Hoshino Kaede instantly came behind him and stabbed him in the back of the head. Taking advantage of the situation, he grabbed the ninja sword and slashed each one with his backhand, killing the clones. Everything seemed so relaxed. Yu Guangye covered his head and grinned, unable to regain his composure for a long time. "Yi, you have a good idea. Use your clone to attract attention, then use translucent escape to reduce your own presence, and then win with one move." Kaede Hoshino commented briefly and intuitively. From the moment when his aura became looming, a name suddenly appeared in Hoshino Kaede's mind: Moonlight Hayate. This tragic figure who was offline as soon as he appeared on the scene, his existence in Konoha is like a meteor, fleeting. But there happens to be a blood inheritance limit Turetsu, which is exactly the same as Moonlight Yoruchi. Although it doesn't look very powerful, if used properly, it can be a powerful assassination weapon. So what if the idea is good? I still can't touch the teacher's clothes. Yu Guangye lowered his head, looking dejected. Mitarashi Zixia said speechlessly, "It's abnormal to meet the teacher." "Okay, go down and adjust, Zixia, come on." Hoshino Phone landed on Zixia. I wonder if this future Minister Umbu can surprise him. Compared to the head-on confrontation on Moonlight Night, Mitarashi Zixia was very cautious, restrained his aura, hid in the grass, and waited for opportunities to move. Excellent hunters often have great patience, and Mitarashi Zixia is like this. But the premise is that the level gap between the hunter and the prey is not too big. Under Hoshino Kaede's perception, there was no way he could hide. "Haha, you are still too young." Hoshino Kaede raised the corners of his mouth, and then disappeared in an instant. Somewhere in the grass, Mitarashi Zixia's eyes widened. After a second, he secretly said, "No, let's go." Boom. The sense of crisis in his heart suddenly rose, and without even thinking about it, Mitarashi Zixia rolled subconsciously and left his original position. I saw Kaede Hoshino punching the ground, creating a hole several meters deep. If it falls on the human body, the consequences can be imagined. "Teacher Hoshino, are you really afraid of losing your temper?" Yu Guangye thought to himself, with a trace of worry flashing in his eyes. Mitarashi Zixia was secretly angry that he was too whimsical, and it was useless to hide his figure in front of such a strong man. On the contrary, Yu Guangye was facing a head-on confrontation and was somewhat self-aware. "Zixia, your performance just now disappointed me, so I will let you taste the pain later as punishment for your misjudgment." Hoshino Kaede walked out slowly, his steps carrying a calm power, and every step seemed to step on Mitarashi Zixia's heart. Mitarashi Zixia gritted his teeth, quickly formed a seal, and said, "Wind escape, wind blade." As his words fell, his cheeks puffed up slightly, as if he was accumulating strength. Then, he spit out several sharp cutting wind blades from his mouth, and struck at Hoshino Kaede with the sound of piercing the air. This wind release ninjutsu made Hoshino Kaede's eyes light up. What a great accomplishment. Hoshino Kaede finally had a smile on his face. The wind blade roared towards me. Hoshino Kaede formed a seal with one hand, and said softly, Earth-style Tushur Lyobi. A solid earth wall rose from the ground, and several wind blades hit it, leaving only shallow marks. Hoshino Kaede walked out from the other side, and what came his way was blazing fireballs. Fire-style fireball. A triumphant smile appeared on Mitarashi Zishia's face. He knew that there was a huge gap in strength, and there was no hope of winning. But it is precisely because of this that Hoshino Kaede despises his opponents. He used the wind blade as his first move, but under normal thinking, he would definitely use the earth flow wall to defend himself, but in fact this was indeed the case. He seized on this inertial thought and used fire-style fireball to catch him off guard. Excellent tactical thinking, promising future. Hoshino Kaede's eyes flashed with surprise, and then he thought to himself. Facing the fireball so close at hand, Hoshino Kaede still looked calm and still had time to comment in his heart. Seeing the excitement in Mitarashi Zishia's eyes, Hoshino Kaede slowly stretched out his hand, and then invisible ripples spread around. The menacing fireball stood still in place for an instant until it disappeared. Bang bang bang, Hoshino Kaede clapped his hands and walked step by step towards the sluggish Mitarashi Zishiao. The tactical thinking is flexible and ninjutsu is skillful in connection. No wonder he is ranked first. Mitarashi Zishiao did not have any joy, but was immersed in the moment when the fireball was stopped. There was horror in his eyes. Is this mastering time? There was a muffled sound and severe pain brought him back to his senses. After focusing his eyes, Hoshino Kaede suddenly appeared in front of him, putting one hand on his shoulder. Mitarashi Zishiao's forehead was covered with cold sweat, his face suddenly turned pale, and his right hand was pulled out of joint. It's not a good habit to be distracted during battle. Hoshino Kaede looked directly at him with cold eyes. Mitarashi Zishiao pursed her pale lips and lowered her head without saying a word. Well, next one. Hoshino Kaede ignored him. There were still many people who needed to be tested. After Hoshino Kaede left, Yu Guangye hurriedly stepped forward and asked with concern, does it hurt? The teacher was too harsh. There was a bit of dissatisfaction in his tone. Mitarashi Zishiao shook his head and forced a smile. It's okay, I shouldn't be distracted when fighting. The teacher has shown mercy. Oh, okay. Yu Guang sighed and turned to look at the other students in the class. Others are probably worse off than you. Maybe, but don't you think that Mr. Hoshino can teach us more and different things? Mitarashi Zishiao said with a smile. Yu Guangye was stunned when he heard the words, thought about it carefully, and nodded. It seems like this is really the case. Teachers usually don't teach us so carefully. After all, we are just an ordinary class, not an elite class. At the end of the sentence, Yu Guangye laughed at himself. The elite class represents geniuses, while the ordinary class represents civilians. People seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. It is more cost-effective to teach geniuses than to teach civilians. This is the case for most teachers. While the two were talking, Hoshino Kaede's test was still continuing, but his face was obviously darker. The basics of these brats are too poor, and chakra is much rarer, but these are not the main point. The most important thing is that they have almost zero combat experience, and they basically just fight randomly. Every hit counted, and the veins on Hoshino Kaede's forehead jumped. This level was simply a challenge to his mental endurance. Okay, I know your level. Except for Mitarashi Zishiao and Yu Guangye, they are all just playing house. I think the village is still too peaceful, which makes you think that ninjas are very easy. In this case, I will let you take a look at ninjas on the battlefield. Every one of them is a delicate flower. It really pisses me off. Chapter 67, Go back to the past and witness the battlefield. Hoshino Kaede spitted like stars and scolded everyone with a look of hatred on his face. Yu Guangye covered her mouth to suppress her laughter and almost didn't laugh out loud. Hoshino Kaede gave him a sharp look, and said with a playful look, oh, it seems that someone here feels good about himself. Yu Guangye's head kept shaking like a rattle, and he said with a flattering smile, no, I think what the teacher said is right, it's so right. Hoshino Kaede looked at it for a few seconds, then withdrew his gaze when Yu Guangye's heart was about to explode. Blue eyes suddenly appeared, and a blue light enveloped the entire playground. The surrounding scene gradually degraded, and the dark tones reappeared. Mitarashi Zishiao's nose twitched, his face suddenly turned pale, and his brows were squeezed into a knot. The faint scarlet smell in the air drifted into his nose, making his stomach churn, and he almost vomited out all his lunch. Ah! There's a corpse! The scream suddenly sounded, causing panic instantly. Everyone was in a hurry, and fear lingered in everyone's minds. Everyone stop it. Hoshino Kaede shouted powerfully, shocking everyone. Yu Guangye pulled the corner of Zixiao's clothes, swallowed, and asked, Zixiao, where is this place? I don't know. Mitarashi Zixiao quickly adjusted herself. Although her face was still pale, her mood was relatively stable. Hoshino Kaede snorted coldly and explained to everyone, this is the camp where Konoha was stationed on the border not long ago. I used time to go back and resurface the scene at that time. Take a good look at the cruelty of ninjas. People are afraid of the unknown. The previous scene shocked their hearts. After learning the truth, they calmed down. Mitarashi Zixiao squatted down, grabbed a handful of soil, and felt it carefully. Yu Guangye asked in a low voice, how is it, how do you feel? He stared at the soil in Zixiao's hand. It's very real. It's completely different from Jinjutsu. Mitarashi Zixiao said solemnly. Not far away, all their words were heard by Hoshino Kaede, who said with a chuckle. One more thing, the world here is real and a scene from the past. If you don't want to stay here forever, don't move around. Mitarashi Zixiao frowned, sure enough, this is the real world. Yu Guangye had different concerns from him. He said nervously, Zixiao, this is the past time. Is this really possible? After saying this, Mitarashi Zixiao nodded without even thinking, of course, you can. What you see in front of you is the evidence. We crossed time and came to the past. The two of them were the only ones present who had other things on their minds. The others had frightened eyes and barely calmed down. Take a good look at how the ninjas on the battlefield are different from the ninjas you imagined. Hoshino Kaede dropped the next sentence, stopped talking, slowly closed his eyes, and rested. If you observe him carefully, you can see tiny beads of sweat on his forehead. Bringing so many people in is a big burden. His current chakra is being consumed rapidly, and he can only rely on recuperation to slow it down. After hearing Kaede Hoshino's words, everyone's eyes focused on the battle in the distance. In order to more intuitively reflect the cruelty of ninjas, the time node arranged by Hoshino Kaede is the moment when Raikage arrives. The boundless thunder struck the ninjas of Konoha, tearing their bodies apart and harvesting their lives. Blood splattered everywhere, limbs flew around, and the bloody scene made the children retching immediately. Is this Raikage? Mitarashi Zixiao was one of the few who could resist vomiting. Her innocent eyes gradually deteriorated and became mature. War brings not only pain but also human growth. If you have not experienced the baptism of blood, you cannot be called a ninja. Is this a war? Is this a ninja? Yu Guangye's body was trembling, he was confused, and he kept mumbling. Seeing that everyone was deep in thought, Hoshino Kaede waved his hand and melted like ice and snow, returning to reality. How do you feel? Do you still want to be a ninja now? Hoshino Kaede said with a smile. There was silence, no one responded. Hoshino Kaede knew this was the case. Konoha can have peace today because of people who are carrying heavy loads. You can play in the sun as much as you want, thanks to those who are working hard on the front lines. The way you were before, I feel like you are a defeated generation, a generation without hope. Hoshino Kaede said seriously and solemnly, his thoughts seemed to go back to the time when Konoha was just established, when Konoha was very poor. But now, Konoha is stronger, the quality of life has improved, children can smile and play in the sun, and don't have to worry about the war spreading here. This is the scene that our ancestors all hoped for. These words made them look ashamed. After witnessing the cruelty of war, they understood that their lives were hard-earned. Mitarashi Zixiao clenched his fists and said loudly, Teacher, we will never be the beat generation. We must be the hope of Konoha's future. The young voice was sonorous and powerful, with a hint of firm belief. Really? Hoshino Kaede raised his eyebrows, scanning each of them with a scrutinizing gaze. Then let me see if it's what you say. That's it for today's class, tomorrow is the real beginning, let's all go back and rest. After saying that, Hoshino Kaede left the place in an instant. Everyone who used to disperse as soon as school was over now stayed in place quietly. Mitarashi Zixiao stepped forward and turned around, a flame flashed in his eyes. We will definitely shoulder the future of Konoha, and we will be the new seedlings of Konoha. Yu Guangye's eyes flickered, he raised his fist and waved it vigorously. Damn teacher, I want him to take back what he just said. The two backbones are like two clusters of flames. Even though the light of the fire is small, it is bright and warm. A little bit of fire drives everyone and brings everyone together. At this moment, everyone suddenly thought, a single spark can start a prairie fire. After returning home, Hoshino Kaede raised the corners of his mouth and revealed a smile. After a moment, he turned his head and said to someone, Tell Tobarama that a year later, the ninja school will hold a competition, and the top 3 in the competition will become my disciples. Students from all grade levels can participate, yes? A voice came from somewhere. Hoshino Kaede shook the teacup in his hand and chuckled, 1 year is enough for them to grow up. Konoha, which has just finished the war, is going to be lively again. Those families are also going to be excited. I don't know if they can get what they want. After thinking about it, I decided to resign myself to fate and let the words out anyway. Then, he saw Maruhoshi Kosuka's eager eyes. Ahem, Kosuka, you're too old, so let's forget it. Hoshino Kaede coughed a few times and said. Okay. After hearing this, Maruhoshi Kosuka looked regretful. Chapter 68, Princess of the Land of Fire, Tsunade. The next day, a shocking news swept the streets of Konoha instantly. First Hokage disciple, Hoshino Kaede, who single-handedly defeated Raikage, is going to hold a competition at the ninja school. The top 3 winners will be accepted as his disciples. The whole of Konoha was in a state of excitement, and everyone was discussing who would become Lord Hoshino's disciple. After all, who in Konoha didn't know Hoshino Kaede's status, that he could become his disciple and reach the sky in 1 step. The children in the ninja school were full of resentment, the teachers became strict one by one, and the atmosphere of the entire school changed drastically. The sound of wailing filled the school, making Kaede Hoshino, who lived opposite, feel happy. But then, his face collapsed, as if he had eaten a pound of bitter melon, and his face showed a bitter look. Tsunade, can you let me rest for a while? You've been making trouble all morning. You woke me up in the early hours of the morning. I really don't have enough sleep. Little Tsunade curled her lips, put her hands on her hips, and said angrily, No, I won't. I'm going to become my brother's disciple. If you don't agree, I won't leave. As she said that, she started rolling on the ground and screaming loudly. Hoshino Kaede rubbed his eyebrows, he felt the girl's trouble. If it was a boy, he would have already taken advantage of it, and why would he bother to talk about it? But unfortunately, there are no what-ifs in the world. As the granddaughter of her teacher, Tsunade has received much attention and favor since she was born. When he was just 1 month old, the daimyo of the Fire Country sent someone to make Tsunade a princess. It can be said that she was born in Rome. However, her noble status made her peers stay away from her. She had no playmates, so Hoshino Kaede spent more time with her. I usually rely on myself a lot, but it is precisely because of this that trouble comes. I don't know who made such a big deal, saying that if he accepts a disciple, he will take away his concern for Tsunade. When these words reached Tsunade's ears, the little guy immediately became furious and ran over aggressively early in the morning. Lai here refuses to leave, but wants Hoshino Kaede to accept her as a disciple. After knowing the whole story, Hoshino Kaede couldn't laugh or cry. What is all this? How could Tsunade be so jealous? Seeing that persuasion failed, Hoshino Kaede had no choice but to change his tactics and coaxed, Tsunade-chan, it's not good to be a disciple. You must not only listen to the teacher's words, but also be strict with yourself. So, you can't go to the casino anymore, you understand. Little Tsunade frowned when she heard this, feeling extremely conflicted in her heart, biting her fingers and pondering. On one side is my brother's concern, on the other side is my beloved gambling, neither of them wants to give up. Seeing this, Hoshino Kaede added jealously, but brother is different. Brother promises that no one will bully you, and will always care about you. Even if you are a disciple, you will never leave. Little Tsunade looked happy and asked eagerly, really? Brother didn't lie to me? Hoshino Kaede quickly raised 4 fingers and swore, of course, my brother swears, it is absolutely true. Seeing Hoshino Kaede's sincere look, a happy smile appeared on Tsunade's face, and she jumped directly into his arms and kept nuzzling him. Brother is the best. Hoshino Kaede breathed a sigh of relief, finally able to coax this little ancestor. Poof, ha ha ha. Maruhoshi Kosuka couldn't help laughing. Hoshino Kaede's face suddenly darkened and she looked at him coldly. Ahem, what, the weather is really nice. Maruhoshi Kosuka shivered, looked out the window, and changed the subject with a dry smile. Hoshino Kaede shook his head and said, okay, stop playing tricks. You send Tsunade back and I'll catch up on her sleep. Throwing Tsunade to Fausuk, she suddenly felt sleepy, yawned, and turned to go upstairs to catch up on her sleep. Jingle bell, the bell rang, and all the students walked out listlessly and tiredly. Compared to them, Hatake Sakumo was much more energetic and went to exercise with Matt Dai as usual. On the way, Matt Dai asked, I heard that Master Hoshino will accept a disciple in 1 year, is it true? Everyone is spreading the word, even children have heard about it, but no one can prove whether it is true or not. Hearing this, Hatake Sakumo showed his dead eyes. Well, regarding this matter, haven't you seen that the recent students are very tired? Everyone is preparing for the competition in a year's time. That's for sure. Who doesn't want to be a disciple of a big shot? Matt Dai said with emotion. Suddenly, Hatake Tsukumo narrowed his eyes and said, there is someone in front. Matt Dai looked over, looking at the figure. He should be a senior. Oh, Yi, your chakra control needs to be strengthened. You can't squander chakra casually. Mitarashi Zishiao said with a crazy look on his face. Yu Guangya couldn't help but retort, I don't focus on ninjutsu, it's more or less fine. Mitarashi Zishiao shook his head and said with a serious face, it's almost the same in normal times, but it's far different in actual combat. You must not take any chances. Okay. Seeing this, Yu Guangya could only sigh and accept. Mitarashi Zishiao nodded happily, then frowned, looked aside, and shouted, Who? Come out. Yu Guangya also looked in his direction. After a while, two figures came out. Mitarashi Zishiao looked at one of them, and then suddenly said, You are the number 1 in the first grade, I remember your name is. Hatake Tsukumo. Hatake Tsukumo? Oh, he's the one who chopped down the entire grade with a wooden sword, right? Moonlight Yoruchi clapped his hands and said in surprise, his eyes were like looking at rare animals, curious and surprised. Hatake Tsukumo twitched the corners of his mouth. This look made him feel very uncomfortable and he felt like an animal. Wow, Tsukumo, you actually did such a thing. Matt Dai had a look of surprise on his face, and then a look of admiration on his face. It would be so awesome to be able to cut down the entire grade. Hatake Tsukumo rolled his eyes at him and said helplessly, at that time, I didn't think too much about the battle. I just wanted to win first place. As a result, I beat more people and ended up like this in the end. It caused a sensation at that time. Wherever he went in those days, people looked at him with surprised eyes. Thinking of it, Hatake Tsukumo couldn't help but feel his scalp numb. Senior Zishiao, are you preparing for 1 year from now? Hatake Tsukumo asked. Yes, I am determined to win the top 3. Speaking of this, Mitarashi Zishiao's eyes were full of fighting spirit. Haha, you have such a good attitude. Yu Guangya shook his head and said. I don't think I can be in the top 3. Those in the 6th grade are much older than us and have more experience than us. Tsukiko Yoruchi had a troubled expression on his face and had a headache. He felt that the teacher had deliberately asked the 6th graders to participate. Wouldn't it put pressure on them? In response, Hatake Tsukumo said calmly, My brother said that there are many factors that determine victory or defeat, and age cannot be the decisive factor. Moonlight Jibanuyan, that's what I say, but it's always a loss. Mitarashi Zishiao patted his shoulder and said confidently, What are you afraid of? We also have things they don't have. Yu Guangya's heart moved, you mean? Mitarashi Zishiao nodded affirmatively, showing a confident smile. Metadai asked Hatake Tsukumo in a low voice, Tsukumo, do you know what that is? I don't know. Hatake Tsukumo shook his head. But I think this will be the key to their victory. Matt Dai had a question mark on his face, but looking at the confidence in their eyes, he suddenly felt that this might indeed be the case. Chapter 69, the 15th year of Konoha, the sunset is really red. 1 year later, the 15th year of Konoha, the weather was sunny and windless. The large playground was crowded with people, and there were endless cheers and cheers. Hoshino Kaede stood on the roof of the school building, looked down at them, and said, Well. I kind of underestimated the influence, there are a lot of people. With a swish sound, Tobarama instantly came to his side. Hearing his words, he couldn't help but say. If Umbu hadn't been maintaining law and order, there would have been more than this. You did this, and now you dislike it? Hoshino Kaede coughed lightly and didn't answer. A wave of waves erupted in the crowd. Seeing this, he laughed and said, Let's not talk about it. Let's look at the competition. That kid Zishiao has changed a lot. He is even more skilled in ninjutsu. Yi is not bad either. I haven't practiced sword skills in vain. I already have the strength of Chunin. It seems that I have put in a lot of effort. Mitarashi Zishiao and Uiguang Yoruchi have a direct connection, directly and quickly solving the battle. The two of them trained day and night for a year. Under Hoshino Kaede's inadvertent tips, their strength improved by leaps and bounds. Even against the upperclassmen, it was easy to win. Tobarama snorted coldly, but didn't say anything more. Instead, he focused on the two of them and commented with narrowed eyes. Mitarashi Zishiao, full attribute chakra, like monkey, ranked first in the same grade, is a good seedling. Moonlight Knight, members of the Moonlight clan have learned the Konoha-style sword technique and have the power to penetrate the blood barrier. From the current point of view, these two people have a high probability of winning. Hearing Tobirama's comments, Hoshino Kaede couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth. After all, this was the person he was optimistic about. Tobirama glanced out of the corner of his eye, saw his proud expression, and poured cold water on him with a cold snort. Humph, don't be too proud. They are not the only ones who have good prospects in the ninja school. Those who come from big families are not inferior to them at all, or even better. Hoshino Kaede shrugged, unable to argue with this, and suddenly paused, looking at the battle taking place somewhere on the playground, and said, "Who is that kid? Genjutsu is good, and chakra control is smooth." Tobirama followed his gaze, and after pondering for a moment, he searched for his information in his mind. Yuhi Jinhong, 6th grade. According to his teacher, his genjutsu is no less than that of some jonin. He has great potential and a promising future. Hearing this, Hoshino Fang's eyes flashed, the corners of his mouth raised, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. It seems that he is also a strong competitor for the top 3. Tobirama nodded expressionlessly. This was indeed the case for now, but it wasn't the end yet and everything was still unknown. On the playground, Mitarashi Zishiao had just defeated an opponent and was recharging his energy and replenishing his physical strength. Yu Guangye squinted his eyes, held back his breathing, and then used Konoha-style swordsmanship to coordinate with his clones to deliver a gorgeous blow. After defeating his opponent, when he saw Zishiao, he immediately walked over. "Did you see the scene where I showed off my skills? That sword was so cool." Yu Guangye held his head up proudly, looking like a victorious rooster. Mitarashi Zishiao did not answer, but stared at a certain venue. "Huh?" Yu Guangye didn't get a response for a long time and looked at him doubtfully. "That person is very strong," Mitarashi Zishiao said solemnly. Following his gaze on the moonlit night, it was the venue where Zihi Jinhong was. He has black hair, black eyes, and a plain appearance. He is very inconspicuous in the crowd, but his calm temperament makes people shine. Just now, he used Genjutsu to control his opponent, quietly winning at the minimum cost. It was all seen by Mitarashi Zishiao. "Genjutsu? TSK, that's troublesome," Yu Guangye said in distress as he touched his chin. Genjutsu is very difficult for them at this stage. Even if they want to remove Genjutsu, it will take time. This is very disadvantageous in battle. While the two were thinking about countermeasures, a Chunin teacher shouted, "Mitarashi Zishiao versus Hokage." Hearing his name, Mitarashi Zishiao stood up and walked towards the battlefield. "Zishiao, come on!" Yu Guangye cheered him up. Mitarashi Zishiao nodded slightly and walked toward the venue with steady steps. "Are you Mitarashi Zishiao? I heard that you have a winning streak all the way, so you are a good opponent. But that's it for now." Hokage, a 5th-year student, said in a deep voice, with a hint of pride in his tone. He believed that with his age advantage and the background of the Jonin clan, victory would be easy for him. Mitarashi Zishiao did not respond to him, but looked at the teacher and said, "Can we start?" The teacher was stunned for a moment, and then said, "Start." Being ignored, Hokage had a look of embarrassment on his face, and immediately launched a gentle fist stance and attacked. Gentle fist 32 palms. With a low shout, the steps under his feet changed, and countless fist shadows rushed towards him. If hit, the meridians will be blocked, which is fatal to the ninja. Mitarashi Zishiao was fearless and allowed the shadows of fists in the sky to hit him. Hokage looked happy, but then his expression changed. There was a bang and white smoke filled the air. It was a clone technique. "No, I fell into a trap." Hokage suddenly became alert and wanted to retreat. But the next second, several wind blades came from behind. Hokage dodged left and right, but before he could stand firm, Mitarashi Zishiao appeared instantly and focused on his lower body. Not giving them any time to react is the difference in combat experience. There is always a difference between theory and practice. Over the past year, in addition to teaching ninjutsu, Hoshino Kaede has focused most on practical experience. At Hokage's level, he can only fall prey to Mitarashi Zishiao in the end. Mitarashi Zishiao grabbed the flaw, swept underneath him, and knocked Hokage to the ground. Just when he wanted to stand up, the cold kunai was already placed on his neck. There was no doubt that Hokage was crushed from head to toe. Everyone watching the battle stared with horror in their hearts. The Hyuga clan members all looked extremely ugly, as if they had eaten flies. After this, it was completely Mitarashi Zishiao's solo show, and she was led by the nose. Gentle Fist's advantage was not used at all, and there was no chance to fight back. "Mitarashi Zishiao wins," the teacher announced, raising his hand. Next game, Yu Guangye versus Uchiha Feng. Before Yu Guangye came up to congratulate him, he heard his name. Uchiha? Why do you have to meet such an opponent? Yu Guangye cried out in pain. Sharingan is simply a natural killer for him, and the effect of his penetration has been greatly reduced. After the game, Mitarashi Zishiao saw this and comforted him, "Relax, we will meet you eventually. The penetration is not useless anymore. Let them see your strength." Yu Guangye sighed and stepped forward silently. Civilians are just civilians, they don't even have the courage to fight. Uchiha Feng said mockingly. Damn it. Yu Guangye clenched his fists, anger rising in his heart. They say Uchiha is arrogant, but he finally saw it today. More than just being arrogant, I think they are just a group of people with brain problems. They ridicule when they come up. Do you know how to be polite? Chapter 70, The End, Disciple. Oh, you're angry? It's just incompetent rage. Uchiha Feng said provocatively. Yu Guangye's eyes darkened and he said coldly, I hope you will still have such confidence in the future. As the words fell, a faint, cold murderous intention spread and hit Uchiha Feng's whole body. Uchiha Feng's pupils shrank, and he subconsciously took a step back, but he quickly reacted and said angrily, You are just a civilian, what qualifications do you have to stand here? Mitarashi Zishiao off the court showed a mysterious smile, that guy Yi, it's scary to be angry. The battle begins. Teacher Chunin finished speaking. Uchiha Feng suddenly opened his scarlet eyes, with two Magatama slowly rotating in his pupils. Two Magatama Sharingan. Yu Guangye frowned, it turned out to be Ermagatama Sharingan, which is troublesome. Yuki Heifeng said arrogantly, in front of these eyes, all your actions are invisible. There was a trace of fear in Yu Guangye's eyes, and that kind of vague gaze lingered. Fire style great fireball technique. The Uchiha wind struck first, with several basketball-sized fireballs coming fiercely, and the heat hit the face. This kind of attack with an obvious trajectory would naturally have no effect. Yu Guangye dodged quickly, as if dancing in the wildly dancing flames. But it wasn't over yet. Uchiha Feng was obviously prepared and did not rush forward rashly. Instead, he used kunai and shuriken to test. Needless to say, Uchiha's throwing skills are indeed powerful. Hidden weapons fly like raindrops into the moonlit night. Every attack is full of strategy and calculation. Yu Guangye dodged left and right, and his figure shuttled between hidden weapons like a phantom. Uchiha Feng obviously wanted to consume his energy first, but after attacking for a long time, Yu Guangye could only pant slightly. There is obviously plenty of physical strength left. What a mistake, your physical strength has improved so much. Uchiha snorted coldly. He relied on the ninja clan and investigated the participants. He naturally knew about Yu Guangye's situation and that his physical strength was weak. But the scene now really slapped him in the face. Yu Guangye raised the corners of his mouth slightly, seeming to be happy or mocking. Your information is out of date, and you are too underestimated. As soon as he finished speaking, Moonlight Night turned into a white smoke and disappeared from the place. What? Clone. Uchiha Feng's mind was spinning rapidly, and his heart was filled with doubts. Impossible. Under these eyes, any disguise is in vain. His voice was full of disbelief. Uchiha Feng suddenly became panicked, and suddenly a chill rose up from his back. His good fighting qualities allowed him to react immediately. The body tilted slightly, and the ninja sword barely grazed his body. Yu Guangye's expression froze, and he was very surprised. Uchiha Feng hurriedly pulled away and looked at him with lingering fear. It's so dangerous to escape. Yu Guangye frowned and looked at him slowly. Is your body reacting subconsciously? Just now, what was supposed to be a winning move was narrowly avoided, which surprised him. The existence of Tuyu caused his aura and sense of presence to plummet, which ordinary people would not notice. Just like an assassin in the dark, he quietly completes his assassination mission. But Uchiha Feng reacted on the spot, which was beyond his expectation. I admit that I underestimated you. Uchiha calmed down his turbulent emotions and looked at the moonlit night and said. You deserve all my efforts. When Yu Guangye heard this, he curled his lips and said, a tough-talking guy. After several rounds, the two of them fought back and forth. Sharingan is really a powerful weapon in battle, greatly reducing the effectiveness of penetration. I was noticed by the Uchiha wind several times. Come on, Yi. Mitarashi Zishiao was worried in his heart. After these few rounds, he felt that the situation was a bit critical. Ding, ding, the sound of gold and iron collided with each other, kunai and ninja swords collided, and no one could do anything to the other. Uchiha gasped for air and said with a smile, this should be a draw. In his opinion, both sides have exhausted their energy, no one can go further, and the draw is obvious. But things were not that simple. Yu Guangye showed a firm gaze and opened her lips slightly, as if she was whispering something. Then, under Uchiha Fang's shocked gaze, Yu Guangye's strength suddenly relaxed. Without the obstruction of the ninja sword, the kunai stabbed directly into Yu Guangye's shoulder under the inertia. Poof! Lines of blood splashed out, piercing deeply into the flesh. Yu Guangye's eyes were calm, as if he felt no pain, and then he put the ninja sword on Uchiha Fang's neck. Moonlight Night wins. Teacher Chunan's eyes were shocked for a long time, and then he came to his senses and announced the result. Uchiha Fang sat paralyzed on the ground, stunned for a long time, his eyes were very complicated. Yu Guangye's eyes were like a pool of stagnant water, looking down at him. Yi! Mitarashi Zixia rushed over to stop the bleeding, and at the same time looked at him seriously and silently, as if questioning his nonsense. Let's go. Yu Guangye smiled, as if he couldn't see the blame in his eyes. Mitarashi Zixia raised his eyebrows, sighed, helped him aside, and then called the medical ninja over. Looking at Yu Guangye's leaving back, Uchiha Fang smiled bitterly, remembering what Yu Guangye said to him. Have you seen blood? Looking at the red blood, Uchiha sighed and left the venue. Yu Guangye's decisive behavior made the two people on the roof have different expressions. After a while, Hoshino Kaede touched his chin and said, "That boy is really brave, isn't he afraid of making mistakes?" Tobarama snorted coldly and said unforgivingly, "Humph, you reckless boy." The words are so, but the appreciation in the eyes cannot be faked. Haha, I can't say what I mean. Hoshino Kaede chuckled. Well, it's over, the top 3 have come out. Hoshino Kaede watched the last competition come to an end, and then jumped down. Yuhi, Jinhong's opponent, was fooled from start to finish and easily won. At this stage, he could be said to be unbeatable. So far, the top 3 have appeared. Mitarashi Purple Sky, Moonlight Night, and the True Red Sunset. After the competition, the 3 came to Hoshino Kaede. Mitarashi, Zixiao, and Yu Guangye were much calmer. After all, they had been getting along for more than a year. Yuhi Mahong looked at Hoshino Kaede very curiously. Follow me. Hoshino Kaede left a sentence and started running quickly. Seeing this, the 3 of them looked at each other and hurriedly followed. Hoshino Kaede led the 3 of them to a stream, stopped, turned around and looked at them. My name is Hoshino Kaede. I said a year ago that whoever can take the top 3 spots can become my disciple. The 3 of them all became solemn and serious, the most important thing was about to come. Since I have spoken out, I will never break my promise. Are you willing to become my disciples? The moment Hoshino Kaede finished speaking, Mitarashi Zixiao and Yu Guangye said in unison, yes. Seeing this, Yuhi Jinhong also quickly said, yes. Hoshino Kaede smiled when he heard this, then, it's time to change my words. Teacher. Times 3, the 3 of them shouted crisply,